Hi, this is Chuck Schrader from SK Global. I'm a senior solution architect, and today we are going to cover the topic of outsourced check payments. So, for Treasury Automation Suite, as many of you know, we can do lots of electronic payments. And when it comes to outsourced checks, that is really for us just another type of payment within the electronic payment family. So when we start, we would first go to the payment format and choose a payment format that supports that type of payment. So most of the ISO formats uh, support outsourced checks. You'd have to look at whatever type of bank you were dealing with to determine what type of payment. But again, most of the ISO formats, the XML formats, support that type of payment. So you can see this is Bank of America I'm using for an example. And I go in and just make sure that the outsourced check format is selected. At that point, I would go in and assign that uh, to a method of payment. In this case, I assigned it to Bank of America check. And then I would assign that method of payment specification to whatever vendors I want to pay by this outsourced check um, method. So when I want to go to pay these vendors, um, I would create invoices, of course. First, I created some invoices earlier for this particular vendor, and by having those method of payment and payment specification on the vendor, that defaulted into all the invoices. So where we would normally pick up is in the payment process. So I created a vendor payment journal already, and now I'm going to add some lines to it. The typical way I would add lines to this is via a payment proposal. So I'm going to do a create payment proposal. Um, I am going to include all of the outsourced check method of payment in my proposal. I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to make sure that I fill out the uh, outsourced check as the or the bank, Bank of America as the bank, and outsourced check as the method of payment. I'm creating the payment proposal. It should pick up all the invoices with that method of payment. I'm going to go to the create payment screen or create payments button, and that's going to push these into the payment journal. So again, normally you would run a whole payment run. This might be many payments that are in here, but from this point forward, again, it's just really treated like a standard electronic payment, even though it's checks. So because it's tied to a treasury automation format, these options are available to send now, send later. So basically, do I want to create it in one step or several? I'm going to kind of go through the separation of duties here. So accounts payable would do the send later step and turn it over to Treasury to kind of release this file to the bank. So I'm going to actually navigate to that screen via the inquiry screen here. So I'm going to go to the create and send. If there was that separation of duties, this is where treasury or finance type of role would typically take over. So I have this file, it has this one outsourced check attached, and I simply select it. By default, the next action is create and send. So I create and send, and this pushes the file, creates the file and pushes the file to the bank. So at this point, the file has been transmitted to the bank. I can look at the file and see if this was made up of, in this case, one payment or if it was made up of 100 outsourced checks. It really wouldn't matter. All the payments would be listed here. Um, so I've created the file. Normally, again, we treat this as a standard electronic payment. So if the bank is sending back an email response, then I'm going to come in here and complete this process manually. If the bank is sending back a electronic response, the part I'm doing here would be completed automatically as part of reading in the inbound file, the acknowledgement file, if you will, from the bank. So I'm not talking to a real bank here, of course, in the demo system. So I am going to just complete this process manually. So I'm going to go click begin processing, and this is the complete step. So I have mine set up to automatically post the journal once this is done. So it is posting the journal. If there was emails associated with this, normally with a check, if you're going to actually send a printed check to someone, you probably would not have email set up for that. You would probably turn it off for that particular payment type. So now I'm going to go into the vendor and see how this kind of looked on the vendor side. So I'm going to this vendor, I'm looking at transactions, and when the screen comes up, I should be able to see that there was an invoice out here, and then this invoice got paid. If I go into cash and bank for this particular account, I should be able to see a check that was outstanding for this. So I'm going to go into the bank accounts, and I am going to go into the Bank of America account, and I'm going to look at transactions, and I can see that there is a check that was issued. And from this, all intents and purposes, it looks like a standard check that was issued out of D365. In this case, though, we just had the bank do this printing inside instead of us. So there's a lot of advantages really to kind of having the bank do this. If any of you have tried to configure a check inside of D365, you know that can take some considerable time and effort to get that just right so that the check prints exactly right. By having that outsourced to the bank, typically there's on a bank portal, there's a couple settings and signatures to set up, but then the actual printing of the check happens at the bank, and it saves a lot of configuration and tuning and setup, fine tuning and setup time inside of D365. That's all I had for this little mini lesson. So thanks for watching.